So to get married to them is a false economy. Because now there's greater demand, so rather more supply, less demand. So one day when your child comes and says, Ammi, I've seen this girl, I really like her. What should the mother say? Puta, whatever you do, don't get married. Because until then, you will live happily ever after. This is the truth. Now you know why. Because otherwise, people have these problems in their lives. My goodness, number of times and couples come into the monastery and they talk about how living with their spouses become, hell on earth. But that's not how they used to be. That's not how they used to be. But why is it now? They come and ask me. I'm not an expert on marriage, but I know a thing or two about how the mind works because of the Buddha's teaching. So when you apply the principles of the Dhamma into that situation, ticks all the boxes. Yep, time and time again. An example that came to mind, just to help better understand that pleasure is relief from vexation. On one of my recent meditation practices, I'll share with you. Imagine there's a drum. Okay, a drum. So a drum is it's a percussion instrument, right? Yes. So you have a drum. A guy sees a drum, but he's never seen one ever in his life before. So he sees this object. He doesn't know it's a drum. He sees this object and he wonders, what is this object? Now, of course, he's curious, like the rest of us. So what he does is he walks up to this instrument, which we know is a drum, but this guy doesn't, because he's never seen one ever in his life before. So he walks up to this instrument, or this object, and what he does is he bangs it with his hand. He just goes bang. Now I say bang because that's the noise that comes when you hit the drum, but what he does is he just hits the surface or what do you call it on a drum? The skin? Yeah, the skin of the drum. So you hit the diaphragm or the skin or whatever you want to call it, the drum basically, where you're supposed to hit it. And then that produces a sound. Right? Any drum would. So when a sound is produced, this guy hears that sound and he thinks, that's a lovely sound that's just come from that. That's just come. That's all he knows. So he hits it again. And again he hears that sound. And again he thinks, that's a lovely sound. So he hits it a third time. It's a lovely sound. This guy doesn't realize that what he's hitting is a drum. And it's the nature of a drum, being a percussion instrument, which has air trapped within it, to vibrate, and therefore once it's hit, to generate a sound. He doesn't realize that this is a drum and that is how a drum works. What he thinks is, I hit the drum, I heard a noise, ooh, wow, what you're capable of. What's he pleased with now? His palm, his hand. He thinks, I never knew you could do that. So he hits it again. And again he hears that sound. Again he thinks, this is marvelous. I never knew that you could do such amazing things. He doesn't realize that it's a drum that he has just hit. And no matter what you hit the drum with, you're going to get a sound and it's going to sound pretty much the same. He thinks that it's the hand that made the noise. So what he's going to do next? He's going to wonder, perhaps there are other things that can also bring me that sound. Then he goes walking and he finds a stick. He brings the stick and starts hitting the drum with the stick again. This time around again he hears that noise. Oh, just like my hand, this stick is also quite a marvelous thing. It's quite magical. How this stick can bring such lovely sounds. Then he goes looking again for other things that can make this sound. He goes all over the world looking for things that can generate this sound, but not realizing that it's the drum that's doing all the hard work. He thinks it's whatever that object is that hit the drum that is generating this sound that he finds quite pleasurable. The way our mind works, and through ignorance, the decision that we come to is pretty much the same. In this example, the mind is the drum. Okay? The air that's trapped within it is this mind that's in a state of vexation. When this drum is hit, now the air particles within the drum start to vibrate. That's like the mind was in a state of vexation, now being relieved from vexation. That's a process, and the outcome is what? Pleasure. Like the sound that comes because of the vibration of the particles that are trapped inside the drum. But this was triggered by, no surprise, because that guy came and tapped the drum. That was the trigger. That was only the trigger though. It was not what was responsible for the sound that came from the drum. But through ignorance, this guy thinks that it was the hand that's done this marvelous job. Likewise, people think that it's the sound or the sight or the smell or the taste that came from the outside world that brought me pleasure, because they don't see what's happening in between. People think that it's the sight that brought me pleasure. Why? Because imagine the hand in that example is the sight that you've just seen. You've just seen a sight. That's now hit the drum. Or that's come into the mind as a mental object. Mind is in a state of vexation. Released from vexation. Now you get pleasure that comes out of that process. Like the sound that has just been generated from the drum. This guy thinks that it was the hand that brought this sound, and we think it's the sight that brought me pleasure. Okay. He's never seen a drum before. Why is he attached to this? This is where views that we get from the outside world come in. So one fine day, someone said, hey, there's something interesting. I think you should go and explore that a little bit. So they pointed at a drum. This guy didn't know what it was. Someone just pointed at this instrument and said, there's an interesting object in this that we have in this world. You should go and explore it a little bit. Remember, as we talked about last week, you and I, we don't need to be taught about pleasure. Because pleasure is not a new experience for any of us. Throughout samsara, we have experienced pleasure time and time again. This is why we've come through in samsara. For pleasure. For the purpose of pleasure, we've come through. So you don't need to teach somebody about pleasure. We can all experience that. The only thing that someone needs to be told of is there's yet another object that can bring you pleasure. So someone points at the drum and says, that object over there, that can bring you pleasure. So now this guy walks up to it. And now he starts interacting with that object. Just like you interact with all sorts of objects that you come across in the world. The first day you saw a flower in your life, you started an interaction with it, did you not? That's why you opened your eyes and you saw the color that came in through your eyes. That wasn't enough. You walked up to it. You touched it. You're continuing your interaction with it. Then you held it to your nose. Now you can smell it. Some of you who might have been quite adventurous might have put it on your tongue just to see what it tastes like. This is all interactions that you're having with the outside world, but the reason you walked up to it is because someone said, flower, interesting object, go and have a look. And it might not necessarily have been flower in particular, but growing up we just learned that everything in the world we need to go and study, we need to go and explore, we need to go and understand. Be curious, people taught us, didn't they? Have you not been taught to be curious? Then we learn that at school. Be curious about the world. Learn about the world as much as you possibly can. Go and explore. Make an adventure out of living life. But it's such a shame that the moment you are experiencing relief from vexation, at that moment in time, something comes in through your eye. A sight comes in as well. And what a pity, these two you join up. They are independent, they are not related. But through ignorance, we join the dots and we form a bridge between these two. And then come to the conclusion, it's the sight that brought me pleasure. It's the sound that brought me pleasure. The taste, the smell, the touch that brought me pleasure. but it wasn't them that brought pleasure. It was relief from vexation that brought pleasure. This is why, like the drum, it doesn't matter what you use to strike the drum. For as long as that process is run within the membranes of the drum, you're going to get a sound. Yes or no? For as long as the particles within the drum, the air particles within the drum will vibrate, it doesn't matter what triggers it, does it? No, you throw whatever you want at it. Whatever you throw at it, whether it's a rock or a stone or whatever, you throw at it, or a brick. For as long as you're not going to damage the membrane, whatever hits that membrane, whatever hits the skin or the diaphragm, it's going to trigger that process. And the process is going to be the vibration of those particles. And as a result of that, a sound is going to be generated. So it's the process that brought the sound, not the trigger. The trigger only kick-started the process, that's all. It was complementary, yes. The outside stimulus was complementary. Without it, the process wouldn't have run. But that's not what was solely responsible for the sound that came out at the end. Do you understand the example I just talked about there? So this is what we need to reflect on continuously. The reason that we are attached to this world is because of pleasure. Remember, you're attached to the world. You're not attached to pleasure. You're attached to the world, but because of pleasure. So the two questions to ask: beautiful flower. You're attached to the flower. So if you ask what, it's the flower. If you ask why, is it because it's a flower? It's beautiful. It's the why that we need to fix. Lose a reason to love, and you will not be in that relationship anymore. The reason that you're in a relationship is because there are things that you are attached to. Remove them out of the picture, you're no longer going to be in that relationship. Any kind of relationship. It can be a personal relationship, it can be a business relationship, any kind of relationship. So, don't we have relationships with all things in this world? Flower, what do we have with the flower? It's a relationship. Our mind has a relationship with it. Because it's a source of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. So through samsara, all we've been doing in samsara is seeking pleasure. But it's not pleasure that we were attached to. You attach yourself to Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, but the reason for that is because we think it brings us pleasure. If you remember the example I gave last week, you have a company and you want to hire some people to come and do some work for you. Okay? So you put out a job advert, people apply, and 5 people come around for interviews. At the end of the interview, you decide, these guys are just a waste of time. They have no skill, no education, they have no talent, and they're just going to be a loss to my company and never a profit. So you decide, I'm not going to hire them. Okay? But what they do is they go away and they go and speak to someone influential and they come back with a recommendation letter. Now this recommendation letter you respect because you respect the person that has provided this recommendation letter. Based on the letter, what are you going to do? You hire who? The recommendation letter? No, you hire the 5 people that you rejected initially. It's the same people. They've only come back the following day. They haven't gone and done any courses to improve their skill or talent. They haven't gone on an education course to improve their education. Nothing. They've just come back. The only difference is, this time around they've brought with them a recommendation letter. Based on the letter, you hire the same people you rejected yesterday. Same people. If yesterday you decided that they were a waste of time, what do you think they're going to be today? A waste of time. If yesterday you went through their CV and decided they have no skill, they have no talent, they have no education, based on fact you made that decision, didn't you? But now, because of the recommendation letter, you're hiring the same people. All of a sudden, have they come up with some skill and talent? No, it's the same people. So you hire them, what are they going to do to your company? Bring profit or loss? Loss. You hired them, that's the what. But you hired them why? Because of the letter. That letter is Ashvada. That is what pleasure is. Who wrote the letter? Ignorance wrote the letter. Mr. Ignorance wrote the letter. It's because of that letter you hired the same people you rejected, you denied hiring the previous day. Because last time round they didn't come with a letter. There was no pleasure there. But this time they've come with pleasure. So with pleasure you open the door, come on in. But they're only going to cause you so much trouble. Never any joy. They're not going to bring you any happiness because it's the same people you rejected yesterday. So who are these 5 people that we are talking about here? Indeed. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. They never bring us pleasure because they have no pleasure to offer. The letter says they are very skilled. They're very talented. They're going to make a lot of money for your company. That's what the letter says. But you know their skills, their CV says an entirely different story. If you had known any better, would you have hired them? No. If you had known any better, you wouldn't have hired them. But because of the letter, you took them on board. You went against your better judgment. Based on the letter, you took them in. And now, they're just causing havoc. All they're doing is causing chaos in your company. What is your company? What is this company we speak of? It's the mind. The mind's the company. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana are these 5 people that came looking for a job. Previously you denied them because if through wisdom you had made that call, you wouldn't have hired them. But they came in with the letter. And on the letter they said, skilled, talented, educated, great guys. Oh well, welcome, come on in. So remember, the letter was written by ignorance. The mind suffers from ignorance. Because ignorance is not something that comes from the outside where we can look at it and go, that's ignorance, so I'm not going to accept it. It's intrinsic. Ignorance is part of the very fabric with which this mind has been woven. For as long as ignorance prevails, you're always going to make the wrong choice. Because good looks like bad and bad looks like good. Remember the equation we spoke of some time ago? X times minus 1 equals Y. Times minus 1 is ignorance. So whatever number you plug into X, you're going to get the negative of that. So put in a negative number, you get a positive number. Put a positive number, you get a negative number. So good looks like bad, bad looks like good. That is what ignorance is like. So for as long as ignorance prevails in this mind, you can't not attach. It's not something you can do. I am ignorant, I'm not going to attach. You can't do that. Because what is ignorance? Ignorance is nothing other than attaching is good. So when from the inside you're coming up with attachment is good, why would you not attach then? If attachment is good, why wouldn't you attach? You'd always do the right thing, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? Would you not always do the right thing? You would always do the right thing, yes. But through ignorance, the right thing is the wrong thing. That's the problem. The wrong thing looks like the right thing. That is the problem. So you're always doing the right thing. Ask a murderer, was that right of you to do that? Of course. Under those circumstances, I had no other choice. It's not right that you send me to the gallows. I was right in my choice, says the murderer, says the robber. Justifying. You'll always justify it. But it's an ignorant mind that always justifies the wrong thing. Because ignorance is simply that, sir. Seeing right as being wrong and seeing wrong as being right. But you're always only going to go for the right thing. But that right thing is going to be the wrong thing. That's the problem. So this is why until someone becomes a sotapanna, now right view has been planted in this person's mind. Now their view is no longer distorted. Now their view is right. So now They no longer see right as being wrong. The -1 in the equation has gone to become a +1. That's what right view is. Now you plug in a negative number, you're only going to get a negative number. You plug in a positive number, you're only going to get a positive number. Do you see how fundamental this is? How becoming a Sotapanna is simply the key, and there is no other way out of this? Because now when you have right view, and that's part of your own mind, yes, ignorance still prevails. Remember, ignorance is only removed at the stage of becoming an arahant. But even when ignorance is there in the mind can still make the right choice. Because at the point of making the choice, when the mind makes the wrong choice, the mind knows, I am making the wrong choice. You know you are making the wrong choice, and yet you make that choice. Because you are still attached to pleasure. You know that pleasure is wrong, and that pleasure cannot be anything that is worthwhile. An example I might offer is, let's say someone's got an STD. Okay? It's a disease. And you're going to contract that disease if you sleep with them on the same bed. Okay? So that's the nature of this disease. If you know the nature of an STD, you're not going to go and do that. The reason that you've been doing it is because you didn't know that this person had this disease. A Sotapanna is like someone who knows that they've got this, but because they are so accustomed, so used to enjoying the pleasure of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, they will nevertheless go ahead and engage in that process. But they know fully well that tomorrow morning I will also be in the same boat. They know fully well, but still they'll go and do it. I'll take another example so everybody can understand. Smoking. Back when smoking first was invented or introduced, right? People didn't know that it was harmful. People thought that was the dumb thing. To be somebody in society, you have to smoke. But now it's quite the other way around. People don't like it when someone smokes, generally. So, when smoking was first introduced, was smoking not bad for them back then? Actually, it was worse than it is now. Because now, through advancements and improved filters and things like that, and better chemistry, now at least the damage that it does to your insides has been reduced to some extent. But back then, the damage would have been unimaginable, because the science was not so advanced back then. So people smoked. So when people don't realize that smoking is bad for them, they'll go and smoke. And sometimes you have chain smokers. One day, this guy who's a smoker, he goes to the doctor, gets himself examined, and gets an x-ray of the lungs, a chest x-ray, and on there, the doctor points out, hey, you've got tar on the insides of your lungs. If you continue at this rate, you're not going to last very long. Now this person knows that smoking is bad, is harmful for them, for their health. So this guy now knows this because it has been proved. Empirical truth. There's evidence now. This has been proved. Now, he or she realizes this is bad for me. I had better stop smoking as soon as I possibly can. But because of the addiction that they have, it's hard for them to give it up. But every time they take a puff, don't they know that every puff I take is taking me one step closer to my death? They know that fully well. But still, they can't give it up because of the addiction that they've had for a long time. They've been smoking. Like you and I have been smoking throughout samsara. Smoking what? Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. This is what we've been smoking throughout samsara. We didn't realize that this is not good, this is harmful. So we kept smoking. But one fine day, you got to listen to the Dhamma. So this guy went to the doctor, got himself a chest x-ray, and now he sees this is harmful, this is damaging my health, I had better stop. But it's going to take him time to break the habit. Until the habit is broken, he's going to continue doing it. But every puff he takes, now he knows this is wrong, does he not? He knows this is wrong, this is damaging to my health. So he makes a firm endeavor, I'm going to stop this, hopefully, this is my last one, I'm not going to do it again, hopefully. He makes a promise to himself. And also, before he discovered that smoking was bad for him, let's say a young child comes to him and he asks, what are you doing? I'm smoking, would you like to try one? He might have said, because he doesn't realize that smoking is bad. He didn't, at least not until he went to the doctor. So he praised it. He said, this is good. This is what you have to do. If you want to be somebody in society, you have to smoke. So he spread the word, smoke as much as you possibly can. Go and buy cigarettes, you can find them everywhere. He used to promote it. But now he has come across this understanding that no, it's harmful, it's damaging. Chances are, he's not going to promote it anymore. He's not going to ask somebody to do it. In fact, if someone comes up to him and says, what are you doing? Can I have one as well? He's probably going to say, don't start the habit. I'm struggling to give it up myself. It's a bad habit. It's not going to be any good for anybody. I'm trying to break the habit, so you had better not start it. That is what a Sotapanna is like. A smoker who's gone to the hospital, got himself checked up, and now knows he's got tar in his lungs. Now he's trying to break the habit. Every puff he takes, he knows this is wrong, but he still engages in that. Until one day he is completely able to stop taking cigarettes. That's the day he has become an Arahat. Does that example make sense? Some people, they go to the doctor, get themselves examined, and they decide, oh my goodness, I'm not going to do this ever again. Overnight, they can break the habit. That takes a lot of willpower, a lot of courage, a lot of guts. Right? Some people are like that. They can decide overnight, no, I'm not going to do it ever again. Stop. But others, it's not so easy. For others, they have to go through a process, a healing process. It'll take time. And over that time, they might say, right, next month, I'm going to stick myself to one a day and no more. And the following month, they might say, okay, one every 2 days. The following month, they say one every week. So this is how they learn to wean themselves off smoking. It's going to take them time. And it is not the same on the path in the Dhamma. For some people, all you have to say is anicca dukkha anatta. All raga, dvesha, moha has been eradicated in the flick of a finger. That's all it takes. Instantaneous arahat. But they still went through sotapanna, sakurdagami, anagami, and arahat. There are no instant arahats in that, in that sense. No one goes from being a prutakjana to arahat. You have to go through the process of sotapanna, sakurdagami, anagami, arahat. But that happens immediately. In the flash of a second it can happen, because all you need is one chitta. In the time it takes me to flick my fingers, how many chittas? Billions. So in the time it takes me to do this, you can go from being a prutakjana to sotapanna, sakurdagami, anagami, arahat. There are people like that. If you read the times in the Buddhist time, young people who came to ordain, as their head was being shaven, Kesha, Loma, Naka, Danta, Tacho. Kesha, Sotapanna. Loma, Sakurdagami. Danta, Anagami. Tacho, Arahat. Provided you are receiving that instruction from someone who is also a Margaphalalabhi, a nobleman, a noble person, there is that as well, the paramita that you have been fulfilling throughout samsara. So that ripens at that point in time. There are lots of people like that. The Buddha gives one sermon and there are sotapanna. Others, like, the first sermon the Buddha delivered, the wheel turning sermon, Dhammsakpayatum Sutra Deshana, right? Kondanya went from being a prutakjana to sotapanna, but none of the others went through any transformation because their paramitas had not been fulfilled yet. They had further to go in the path. Because still you need the perfections. Virtue, charity, right?